Thank you for joining us for another episode of Build Your Poetry Manuscript with KMA. I'm KMA Sullivan, the founder and publisher at Yes Yes Books. Today's topic is Your Heartbreak is Not Enough. And by heartbreak, I also mean trauma, tragedy, loss. It's not enough to carry an entire poetry manuscript, not on its own. Why is that? So the first reason is that it is so easy when we experience tremendous loss to feel that we have a lock on pain, a lock on grief. And we have it in the sense that it's devastating. It may break us. It may live with us for decades. But we don't have a lock on pain in the sense that we're the only ones. And in fact, we are surrounded by people who are broken. And when we arrive at our work with the idea, the assumption that we kind of have a lock on it, it's so easy for us to stay on the surface. So easy, because it seems obvious what we're bringing to the page. And it is, but what is obvious is not going to be art necessarily. And it certainly isn't going to be where the fresh language is found. So the first thing we need to do is give up the idea that we've got a lock on this. And that will get us to do some work. Another reason why our heartbreak is not enough is because of the volume, the sheer volume of manuscripts that the publishers are receiving. And also the work that has already been published in the landscape you are likely to be writing. In any given year, I would say 2/3 to 3/4 even of the manuscripts that we receive have as their engine abuse, assault, death of a loved one, betrayal, addiction, illness, racism, coming out to family and being rejected. And I'm not saying that all poetry manuscripts have as their engine heartbreak, grief, but a lot of them do. A lot of them do, and those are the ones we're talking about today. So your manuscript, because that's what we're here for, it's not just writing a single poem. It's about strengthening your poetry craft, but also crafting a manuscript. You need to know the competition out there is wild. And it is so because of how much pain is in the world, because of how much pain is experienced. So you got to know that going in. So the fact that the landscape is covered with broken humans does not make your work less important, not at all. It is one of the reasons why your work is important. But how to turn it into a manuscript? So, first off is to acknowledge it within yourself that your pain isn't as unique as it feels. But here's the other thing. It is unique. And how do you get to that? So one of my pieces of advice is actually to not write about your heartbreak, your tragedy, too soon. Now, some pain builds over years, over decades, but some pain also has a pretty distinctive starting point. For instance, loss of a loved one or betrayal in a relationship. For that type of loss, I would recommend writing, of course, writing, but also waiting to see what happens with that set of emotions inside you. Because when we're in the middle of white hot pain, it blinds us to a lot of things. It blinds us to the broader context. It blinds us to complexity. The more complex stuff comes later. It's not just grief. It can also be disappointment. It can be disillusionment. And then there also can be positive things, weird positive things that come out of pain. Not always, but sometimes. Having enough distance to be able to see the complexities involved in your processing and living through and surviving tragedy, trauma, and sometimes only surviving part of the way, right? We don't need a happy bow at the end, because that's not real for a lot of people. The art is going to be found in getting to what is absolutely real. And what is absolutely real does not live on the surface of things. So you need to give yourself time and the ability to dive all the way in. Acknowledging complexity is particularly important for a manuscript because you've got a lot of poems. And here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to be writing the same poem over and over. You've got to move your heart around. You've got to move your mind around. You've got to move the landscape around. You are bringing the reader on a journey in one way or another. How do you get to the uniqueness? You get there by being as specific to yourself as possible. So here's an example. You and I both have a piece of toast. I like burnt toast. I don't exactly know why, but I suspect it has something to do with a childhood attachment to memories of my grandmother. I was very close to one of my grandmothers, and I have such memories of sitting by the fire. She would toast the bread over the fire, and we would eat that together, maybe with a little cheese on top, with some tomato soup that she heated up. She did not know how to cook. She knew how to heat tomato soup and steam broccoli, and she could make a mean Yorkshire pudding and, please help me, tomato aspic. Those are the food memories I have with my grandmother. But the moments where we sat by the fire and she toasted bread over the fire for me, and we would sit in the quiet and talk about things. So those are my associations with toast. Your associations with toast are going to be entirely different. Entirely different. Indeed, I can't even imagine them. So if you think about the chasm between my experience of toast and your experience of toast, and then think about what must be the space between your experience of racism or abuse, experiencing abuse, or death of a loved one, or illness, compared to someone else's. My God, that space is going to be infinite. But you've got to get all the way down into your associations, into your feelings and thoughts, memories, fears, expectations. And that will be where the fresh language is, because it will be unique to you. You're going to find exactly the right words to identify this truth in you. And that's where the art is. So your heartbreak is not enough until you make it enough. Thanks for being here today. Have a great rest of your day.